Hi, I'm Georgie Dickins, host of Stratospheric Leaders, the podcast where I get to have inspired conversations with extraordinary leaders from across capital markets. Join me to hear their game-changing strategies, the personal stories, and powerful sound bites behind their stratospheric success. Every episode packed with wisdom, insight, and real-world lessons, the stuff they simply don't teach you in business school. If you want to elevate your game and most importantly, elevate those around you, this podcast is for you. You're in for a treat with this one because I had the absolute pleasure of sitting down with Henry Fernandez for an episode of Stratospheric Leaders. Henry is one of the most charismatic, engaging, and undeniably inspiring visionaries of our time. He's also an incredibly powerful storyteller. Born in Mexico and raised in Nicaragua, he is an immigrant American success story, one that was built through vision, calculated risk-taking, and an unshakable belief, a belief he would find a way to create his dream. Today, as chairman and CEO of MSCI, Henry has led one of the most remarkable growth stories in modern finance. Since its IPO in 2007, MSCI's share price has soared 32 times. The AUM benchmark to MSCI indices now totals a staggering $16.5 trillion. When the company went public, its market cap stood at $1.8 billion. Today, it's around $45 billion, a $43.5 billion increase under his leadership. One of the most powerful insights Henry shared was the advice he would give his younger self: take more smart risk. This is someone who one would arguably say has taken a lot of risk. He would take more smart risks. And another quote: if it ain't broke, break it. Constantly push the boundaries of what's possible. This conversation is packed with extraordinary lessons, deep insights, and actionable wisdom. Have your pen and paper ready. There's going to be lots you want to jot down. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. So, Henry, I am truly excited for you to be a guest on Stratospheric Leaders because this is a podcast where I get to have conversations with extraordinary leaders from across capital markets. And I've had the great privilege of getting to know you over the last 4 years because you very kindly were one of the leaders who agreed to be profiled in my book, Stratospheric CEOs. And I've had the also great privilege of going behind the curtains, hearing your leadership insights, your lessons, your strategies, your tactics. And one thing that really, well, many things came up for me, but you are a true visionary and you are also an extraordinary storyteller. So I know today's session or today's episode is going to be a masterclass in leadership excellence. So I am truly excited to dive straight in. And I always like to start the episodes with getting a sense of who are you when you're not in the seat that you sit in? And I was just going to ask, look, there are many qualities that have contributed to your success. And across history, we have seen many leaders who've reshaped history in dramatically different ways. And I've chosen 8 what I think are iconic leaders. And I was going to ask, who do you identify with most and why? Some of them are a little bit controversial, but I have Einstein, Churchill, Steve Jobs, Caligula, Genghis Khan, Logan Roy, he's from Succession, Maximus Decimus, the Gladiator, and Richard Branson.
I would say Winston Churchill, and for a number of reasons. The first one, he was irreverent, eccentric. Some people sometimes accuse him of being crazy. We'll talk a little bit about that borderline between genius and craziness. But a lot of what he did was he had a mission. He had a strategy. The mission in his mind was to free the world of Nazi Germany and Hitler. He had a strategy, had to achieve that. He needed to sell that strategy to the British people and the world, especially the American people. And he needed to inspire people in order to keep the faith over a long period of time. And he needed to demonstrate determination, especially in that famous speech that he gave when he said, never give in, never give in, never, never, never. He basically said, we are not going to be defeated. We will prevail. and he was able to navigate an extremely difficult period of history, especially for the UK. During that time, especially from the summer of from the summer 1940, when France was run over, by Nazi Germany, to to November of 41, when Pearl Harbor was attacked, by the Japanese, and the Americans, came into the war. So I think you have a character here that was highly unusual. He was extremely eccentric, and was able to create major achievements in life, at the time. And he had that incredible confidence in himself, his ability to see through problems. And eventually, he didn't know how he was going to solve. He didn't, I'm sure, in moments of weakness, he thought that, that Germany was going to invade the UK, and the UK will cease to exist as an independent country. I'm sure he had those nightmares, but he projected an image of, we will figure out the path. We will get there. I don't know what it is. I don't know how, but we will get there. So leaders in business and in other organizations that have achieved incredible things in life have this ability to see the future, this ability to inspire people to that future, and work backwards and say, we'll figure out the path. Leaders like this have an incredible optimism, an unshakable belief in the future of what their cause is, and an ability to be confident enough that even if they don't have the answers to navigate towards that future, towards that end, they will figure out the way. And Churchill is one of those people that epitomizes that.
There's so many things you shared there, but I love that unwavering belief, the never giving in, that unshakable belief. And that piece, I think it's as an entrepreneur, you need to have that unshakable belief, as you said, that you'll figure out, that you'll find a way.
You always, have that. For an entrepreneur, typically, there are a lot of traits that you need to have as an entrepreneur, but two fundamental ones are that unshakable belief in what you're trying to achieve, that is going to work, that is going to create a company or create a new product, create a new revolution or whatever. And secondly, that you don't know yet have the path, but that high level of confidence that you will figure out the path to get there.
And I think that's the difference that makes the difference when I look at entrepreneurs that succeed. There isn't a crystal ball to see the path ahead, but it's there. You have the mission, and it's that belief just to keep moving forward, because when you know more, more data points become available.
Absolutely. I never met anybody who has achieved an incredible feat in life, who doesn't have that optimism, sense of purpose, galvanizing people, inspiring people, and creating this environment around him or her that we will figure out the path, we will figure out the way, we will craft a way to get to that future. And that is, there are not too many people in life that I know of that have achieved great things that don't have that way.
And I remember one of our conversations, you talked about, when there's that entrepreneurial vision, that a revolution, all revolutions start with a small band of revolutionaries, and it's that ability to see that unmet future which others can't yet see.
Yeah, I think one of the most difficult things for human beings, we're incredible creatures with a lot of attributes. But one of the things that we don't have because of our heritage is long-term perspective. The ability to see 5 years out, 10 years out. And it's not that we're not equipped to do that mentally, analytically, emotionally. It's not that. It is more that we do not have the predisposition to spend time thinking about what the world will look like, or what a particular situation will look like, that far out. And the people that do that, the people among us that do that are called geniuses, because they have this ability to see how the world will look like 10 years out. And it is not because they're true genius. It's not that they have an IQ much higher than ours. They just spend the time thinking about it. They have the ability to sit down and have the patience to shape it, to try to see it, to try to develop it, and to try to then work backwards from there. Most of us, most human beings, don't like doing that. How many people in your life do you know that will tell you what they're doing 10 years from now, or even 5 years from now? Even people that are planning vacations. How many people plan vacations 1 or 2, 3 years from now? I mean, they don't, right? So, and the worst of us, plan vacations like 3 months ahead of time, as opposed to a year or two ahead of time. So that tells you that's how we're made up, because we're made up. We're human beings, human race, made up of millennium, thousands and thousands of years, tens of thousands of years of evolution. And that evolution never taught us to be long term, because we needed to focus what to eat that day. When we're hunters and gatherers, we needed to focus. We weren't going to focus what we're going to do a week from now. The most you could do was, if you live in a cold weather, you needed to focus on how to survive the winter. But that was it. You couldn't go beyond that. So how can we, as a human race, retrain ourselves that easily when we have had tens of thousands of years of shaping us into being short term? It's very hard. So, but that's what a lot of incredible people in life have that ability to shut the short termism and focus on the long term, and have that long term perspective, and they achieve great things in life.
And with that long-term perspective, and I totally agree with you, that nature, that hunter-gatherer, survival mode, the hundreds of thousands of years training that's kind of within us. What are the questions you ask yourself when you're thinking about the long term? Is it, how will world order look like? What will the economy look like? What are the key questions you seek to answer in that space?
First of all, I think I've been blessed. I've been blessed all my life with having developed an ability to dream about the future, and not only dream at night, but daydream about the future. So when I was a teenager, I tried to think of, in whatever professions I was contemplating at the time, was trying to think about, okay, I'm 18 years old, I'm 16 years old. If I were 30, what would I look like, in that profession? Whether it was a banker, whether it was an investor, whether it was a politician, or whatever, I would try to analyze myself at the age of 30, and then daydream, about it. Then when I honed it in to the specific areas, when I was growing up, I wanted to be a politician, helping the development of my native country of Nicaragua in Central America. So when I was dreaming about it, I would actually envision myself creating certain policy, and the effect of those policies, and what they will mean for the country, what they will mean for development, what they will mean for wealth creation, for the country, and all of that. And I was very comfortable, in that environment. I was, when I was growing up, I was a little more of a loner and an introvert. I eventually forced myself to change, right? But I was definitely a loner and an introvert. So I was very comfortable in my own skin. I was very comfortable on being alone, and not around a lot of people, and thinking about these matters, and then working backwards, to see that. So that taught me the incredible power of first of all, dreaming, and secondly, but creating an image of yourself, 5, 10, 15 years from now. But more importantly, working backwards from that image and say, what are the experiences? What are the education? What is the education? What are the network of contacts that I need to have? Who do I need to learn from to become that person?
Mm. And it really strikes me, goals are a place to come from, not a place to get to. So it's your point, once you visualize what the goal is, what needs to drop to make that a reality? And I love what you said about the word daydreaming, because I look at my children sometimes and they can be daydreamers, but children look at the world through awe and curiosity. They don't see any limitations, like everything is possible. And so that daydreaming really connects me to it's that childlike state of wonder.
Absolutely. Even today, I'm in my mid-60s, and I envision myself at 75, at 85, if I'm blessed to live to that age, at 95. So I said to myself, what are you going to be doing at 95? What is the kind of life you want to have if you're lucky enough to get there? And then I envision myself with good health and without good health, and how would I respond to that? And obviously the shorter term for me is 75, mid 70s, because about 10 years from now, and I think about what do I want to be? I think about what is my position in the company that I run, what will be the activities that I will want to be doing, and what would I want my family to be? What do I want my kids? What relationship do I want to have with my kids? I even think about where would I want to live? Would I want to live in a place that is very, very close to my kids and my grandchildren? Or do I want to be in a distant location? And what are the implications of that? I haven't resolved that, but what are the implications of that? So that's that's on the personal side. On the business side, I try to envision my company, MSCI, what it will look like 10 years from now. What size of a company will it be? How many employees? In what locations? What clients do we want to have? What products do we want to offer? What size of valuation we're going to have? What return to my capital providers will I provide during that period of time? So I call that my 10-year corporate strategy. And then once I look at that with my colleagues at MSCI, then we work backwards. But obviously we don't live in an isolated world. So in order to understand a company like ours, which is very global, I need to develop an image of what would the world look like, 10 years from now. What would be the role of China? What would be the role of Europe? What's the role of America? What's the role of emerging markets? What's the role of capitalism? Where we are obviously a provider of solutions to the global investment and finance industry. So I need to envision what will the global asset management industry look like? What will the private equity firms look like? Better yet, the alternative asset managers look like? What size will they have? What will global wealth management, look like in this context? In this, the development of management of savings for wealthy people, in the world. So you need to have a paradigm of your environment. 10 years from now, you need to have sensitivities around it. How about if it is, dramatically different one way or another? What it will look like? There are times in which I think about, we have lived, in America largely in a period of peace and prosperity since World War II. We've had the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Afghan War, the Iraqi War, etc. But those cannot compare to World War II, right? So therefore, I try to envision a bad scenario, which is, what about if the world is at war for a period of time? What does that mean for survival for me and my family, for my business? What does it mean? Now, you don't know how shape that will take. but you need to be ready for that. So I when I was growing up, I learned also this old saying that fortune favors the prepared. So I have no problem going through scenario after scenario in my head, and trying to see what my response to that scenario is. And frankly, a lot of people, family members, friends, colleagues at work say, Henry, you're crazy. Why are you thinking about that? Why are you wasting your time? Why are you wasting your time? And you know what? I like it. So it's not as if it's a torture for me. I like figuring out different scenarios. I like playing them out in my head, in my mind. It's the kind of exercise that makes you better, makes you more resilient. And actually, it's the kind of exercise that makes you even more confident, because once you figure out a scenario that is good and that you prosper in it, you feel very good about it, right? So that's among the things that some people that are always prepared do, right?
And those scenarios you talked about, that envisioning, that kind of visualization, that daydreaming, do you create dedicated space for that, or is it when you're in the shower going for a walk? Like, how do you do that daydreaming?
No, I don't block out time for this. I do it. Whenever it presents itself, right? When you have a long weekend and you have a little more time, I sit there and maybe watching a movie or maybe reading a book. And sometimes it takes me a long time to read a book because after 20 pages in the book, I start daydreaming about something that the book did. So I spend 20 minutes reading and then an hour daydreaming about something that came out of the book, and then I go back to reading the book. So it takes me a long time because I use a book to sort of jot my ideas, to force me to think about things that are being said. But it could be a movie of any kind. It could be a movie, could be an action movie, could be a drama, could be whatever. But I'm always looking for that stimulus, the stimulus that is going to make me think about things, not just be passively watching, or passively reading. So I don't. So that will be another. I think that this issue of this concept of blocking out time to think is never worked for me. And when I've done it, I don't want to think about it. When I've done it, I'm too tired, or something else comes up. So it's not very conducive to creativity to do that. I grab the moments whenever they come. I grab them. I could be at work, I could be driving, I could be on a plane, I could be watching a movie, I could be talking to my kids, and all of a sudden something prompts. There is a stimulus there. So a couple of days ago, I was talking to one of my sons, and we were trying to talk about what it means to have multi-generational success, for example. So he's 25 years old and he's working right now. So imagine 25-year-old having a discussion with me about multi-generational success. So I said, what about your kids? How are you going to teach your kids? How they're going to teach their children? So we start talking about the families that have had multi-generational success, whether it has been in banking or in investments, or whether it's been in the arts. I mean, you have a lot of families that have had generations of artists. So what does so we get into a conversation as to what does it mean? What is the secret sauce for a family to have multi-generational success? So that's an example of, we were just having a conversation about something and his career and his what he wanted to do, and all of a sudden this turned into that discussion. So I let it go. I actually, we stopped talking about his part of it, and we got into a 1.5 hour discussion about multi-generational success. So again, you got to take the opportunity when the opportunity comes and capitalize on it, because it is there. It is at that moment, and you gotta, and if you let it go, it may not come back. that conversation may not come back for a long time.
And earlier in the conversation, you said the word crazy. And I think it's interesting because when, there's many entrepreneurs in the world, whether it's Steve Jobs or Elon Musk, and people can say, they're crazy. And when I look at those identified as crazy, they push the boundaries of what's possible. So that founder craziness, is that something you see in yourself? Is it something you identify with?
Definitely see it in myself. I try very hard not to project it. I try very hard not to give that impression. Others do the opposite. Others try to project that impression of craziness so that they are viewed as disruptors, or they're viewed as, it makes their job easier, in what they do if they project that image. I try not to, not to, but for sure, there are moments like that. And I had a eureka moment a little bit like that when I was before I went to graduate school of business. I was in a PhD in economics at Princeton University, and I was trying to master the subject of macroeconomics and monetary policy, monetary theory, and I was going after it with such a vengeance, with such a zealousness that that there was a period of a few weeks in which I saw the abyss. And I tell myself, and I remember vividly that period. I said, Henry, if you push a little harder, you're gonna go nuts. You're really gonna go crazy, and you may not come back, from this, because you're forcing yourself so out there in the sphere, these theoretical concepts and all of that. What about if you don't come back, right? What about if you just damage your brain and you just don't come back? So I had to stop, right? To make sure I retreated a bit. So in the in the last in my career, the biggest things that I've done in my career, whether it's a large acquisition, whether it's fighting a downturn in the company, or whether it's fighting activist investors, or trying to push people to the frontier of what we do. I feel that I am at the outer edge. I'm pushing myself. I'm pushing people to a sphere that some people could consider crazy. But I try to do it, with a sense of responsibility, with logic, as opposed to just trust me, and the like. And that's a little bit of the Winston Churchill discussion we were having earlier. There were times in which this fellow was probably crazy, right? In thinking that that they were going to win, right? In thinking that the Americans, that it was going to convince the Americans to come into the war, and things like that, right? So I think there is an element of irreverence. I normally call that, I don't call it craziness, I call it irreverence, in incredible leaders, and people who achieve great things in life. They like that. They lack that reverence. I normally sometimes call this also lack of obedience to authority, right? They challenge the status quo. They challenge the normal thinking. They challenge the social norms. They challenge the boundaries of success or power, or whatever, and that's what motivates them. That's what gets them over the line to to do great things in life. And that's no different than the social revolutionaries in the world. When I was at Georgetown as an undergrad, I studied economics and political science, and much more history and political science and economics. And one of my fascinations was to study revolutions in the world. A lot of it because my own country was going through its own political revolution, so I needed to understand it. So I studied the Russian Revolution, the Mexican Revolution, the American, the French, the Chinese Revolution, and all of that. And these are social revolutionaries. These were not, people call them political, but they had a different idea of the organization of society, and therefore those people really stretched the envelope, right, dramatically. If you think about the American Revolution, it was a completely new form of government that they were trying to create. So those people were irreverent. Those people they had no fear. They were out there in the frontier of thinking, and that's what I pride myself to always want to be. Of course, I don't want to cross and fall into the abyss, but there have been times in my life in which I've been very close to it, but thankfully I've pulled back. Right.
But that strikes me as a level of self-awareness, because there's, as you said, there was a recognition you were entering close to the abyss. And I think when any of our strengths, when they're overextended, there's a shadow side. So it's recognizing when we're moving into that shadow. And you talked about challenging the status quo. You talked about pushing frontiers. And when you're innovating, there could be fear in the system and there could be failures. How do you think about failures?
The best thing that can ever happen to somebody. Of course, you don't want to have a fatal failure, right? But my own experience, based on my own experience, I won't be where I am today if it hadn't been for all my failures. And I think failures plants the seeds for success in the future. And again, it's not that we walk around every day wishing that we fail, right? But we will fail. It's just the law of nature that we will fail at some point in something, either socially, in our families, in our friendships, or in business, or in your work environment. And therefore, the issue is not whether you're going to fail or not. The issue is, what are you going to learn from that failure in order to apply it to future circumstances? And there are a lot of people in the world that when they fail, they don't want to talk about it anymore. They want to bury it. They want to forget it. I'm not a masochist at all, but when I fail at something, I go through it thousands of times. Why? Why did this happen? What did I do wrong? What decision in retrospect I should have made better? What this, what that? And I don't do it because I just because I want to torture myself in the failing situation, or reliving the failing situation. I just want to learn from it. I want to learn from it so that in the future I can apply those lessons. It's very hard. It's harder to learn from successes than to learn from failure. And it's normal, right? When you have a lot of success, you're high, you feel great, you talk about your success. But when you fail, it hurts. It hurts so badly that, again, some people don't even want to talk about it. They want to bury it. But if you master the art of enduring that difficulty and that pain and learning, you're going to be successful. So my own company, MSCI, when I took over this failing business at the time, I had failed 3 times. 3 times, and some of at least one of them was pretty bad, right? But because of my ability to learn from those things, I didn't have all the learnings and all the lessons and all of that when I created MSCI, but for sure I had an enormous amount of experience in failing. So I had failed in business 3 times. I had to leave a country because of a communist revolution. And after for the years, I think it was at least 3-4 years after that, it was one of the worst periods of my life. because I was a political refugee. I didn't know where I was going to live. I didn't know if the United States was going to let me live in the country. I didn't know what career I was going to have. I was lost. I was lost. And I went through an enormous period of examinations, retrenching, rethinking. I ended up honing in on a theme, which is, what is the meaning of life? What's the purpose of life? So anyhow, so it's not just failure in business. I had enormous failure socially, which is I was part of a society in a country called Nicaragua. I could no longer be part of that society. I didn't have any more friends in that society. I didn't have any belongings. I didn't have any attachment, but I didn't have anything else. So that's a failure, that you need to deal with. That's a big, deep hole that you need to dig yourself out of. Similarly to a business failure, it could be a personal failure also, like a marriage, right? Or a big setback in your family, with a family member. I grew up. There were five of us. I was in the middle, and my oldest brother, who was 10 years older than me, suffered from very, very severe cerebral palsy. So you have to grow up with that adversity. How do you help him? How do you make sure it doesn't die? How do you make sure? So anyhow, life presents to you a number of challenges, a number of some of which are failures, and if you disregard them, you're not gonna be a hugely successful person if you don't learn from them, if you don't use them as a catalyst to do better things in life. You are disregarding an incredible ability to learn, right?
It reminds me, the Navy SEALs have, they call it an AAR, an after action review, which is that forensic, review of all their, every mission, to be like, what went wrong? What could we have done differently? Like forensic. Because you said, I'm paraphrasing, you pick everything apart. It's not just what could we do better, but it feels like it's forensic. There's a real detailed approach to it.
Yes, and they do it formally, so there is no stigma to it, right? That's the key part. A lot of people don't re-examine their failures, frequently, because there's a stigma to it. There is, you feel that you lost, right? You feel that you'll fail. You don't want to feel you want to feel a winner in life. You don't want to feel like a loser in life. So the exercise of going through what happened when you were a loser is not a pleasant experience. So, but you just gotta learn how to do it, and you gotta take the stigma out of it. You gotta take the torture out of it. You need to train the people around you, whether it's your family or your friends or your colleagues, to walk around, to be open-minded and have an open discussion as to what happened, and the like. So let me give you an interesting sort of personal example about that. Over the course of my life, I've had close friends that, for some reason or another, our relationship got really strained. And I didn't know why. I had no idea. It's just that the relationship got really strained. So I mustered the courage to go to those people a handful of times in my life and say to them, look, I don't know what happened, but I don't think you don't like me anymore. I don't think you have you don't want to have a relationship with me anymore, and that's perfectly fine. But I want to know why. I want to know why. If you want to move on because you have other friends, it's okay. But I want to make sure that if I did something wrong, I want to hear about it, and I want to learn from it, right? That if I did something wrong, and it's not easy to muster the courage and confront somebody as to why they don't want to hang around with you, why they don't want to call you, why they don't want to be with you. Most people just move on, right? So that has been the source of first of all, I felt very proud of myself to, muster the courage to do that. But then secondly, out of those circumstances, incredible, deeper friendships, came out, because we were able to confront the issues. We were able to correct the circumstances, correct the misunderstandings that could have taken place, and develop a better relationship, going forward. And I've done that in business too a few times. There was a company that they always thought we were the enemy, and they were always trying to hurt us. So I called the CEO of the company and I said, "Can we have lunch?" And so I went and explained and said, "What are we wrong? Maybe it's just business, maybe it's just the way you operate, but tell me, why have we done to you to deserve this treatment?" And I'm not here to complain. I just want to know. I just want to know so that we don't do that to other people. So, unfortunately for me, the person said, "Henry, we think of everyone like that too." I said, "Okay." So I did not have a lot of respect for that company, of course, but because they thought of everyone else as being the enemy, which in my world, I always think of everyone, even competitors, as being my friend. I always go around the company saying, I had never met a competitor I didn't like, right? Because either they help me get the company better, or it's a source of potential partnerships that we can do business with in order to serve a common set of customers, right? But anyhow, that's another circumstance in life when something is failing, something is not working, and you have to have the courage to go confront it, and to go figure out what the causes are of this problem, and try to do something about it. And sometimes you're able to, and sometimes you are not able to, and that's okay. But you learn from the experience.
Yeah, that word courage I wrote down. It feels such an important one to underscore. And as I'm listening to you, it's embracing the discomfort. It's not easy, but it's what you then learn, the insights you get because you've had the bravery to ask the questions. And to your point, you said it's forged deeper relationships. Actually, it's been very favorable exercising that courage.
Absolutely, and I think you called it right, which is I didn't describe it that way, but it is an ability, it is an ability to have discomfort. It's an ability that, to sit in a situation that is highly discomforting, that is going to create emotions, is going to create pain, to relive something that you didn't do right, or something. And I attribute my ability to do that, because my upbringing, my parents nurtured me in a way that, to have confidence, which was great. But I was also, little bit of a loner, little bit of a nerd, little bit of an introvert, and therefore I was comfortable in my own skin, right? I was comfortable in my own skin, and that's what people normally say. You're comfortable in your own skin, but sometimes you may be comfortable in your own skin, but you may not be comfortable in discomfort. So I think you call it right.
And you used the word pain a minute ago, and from the outside looking in, I think entrepreneurs like yourself have to have a very high pain threshold. How do you think of, again, do you agree? And what comes under that pain threshold? What do you have to learn to be comfortable with?
I don't think it's pain. Sometimes it could be a little bit of pain, but I don't think it's generally pain. I think it's just being comfortable with failing, is being comfortable with your ideas being rejected, your vision of the world being called crazy, is comfortable with people looking at you and say, "Wow, I mean, you're going too far. You're pushing people too much," and being fine with that. And there is a sociological element of I think people like that, which they're comfortable being rejected by society. Is a point, right? They're comfortable being rejected by society. Most human beings want to be accepted by society. They want to belong. They want to be accepted. So an example of a personal example of that is maybe my English is a little better right now. It's not perfect, but it's a little better. But it wasn't as good when I started in Wall Street. So I will go to meetings, and when I would notice that when I spoke in meetings, people had to pay a lot of attention because they needed to understand exactly what I was talking about. And and there was a partner in the firm at the time that came over to me and said, "Henry, this is a problem. You need to go to speech school so that you perfect your language, so that you can speak like an American, like a Native American, like a regional." And and I went home and I thought about it and came back and I said, you know what? I'm perfectly comfortable being different. I don't have a problem being different. I don't. So I will walk into a room and I had no problem being the only Latino in the room, the only guy who didn't speak the language well, the only little colored people. I had no problem with that. I was comfortable in my own skin. I was comfortable in that social environment. And if anything, I told people, I said, if my name were Joe Smith, and I were in that meeting and I said something, nobody will remember. But since my name is Henry Fernandez and I speak with an accent, whatever I said, somebody will remember. So it's a competitive advantage, to be honest with you. It's a competitive advantage. And, and at the time that I was, in my early career, Henry Kissinger was a big figure in the political world. And I used to point to Henry Kissinger. I said, this fellow speaks very slowly and with a very heavy German accent, and he has no problems influencing people, in the world. So that's, so therefore there is another trait here of people that achieve great things in life. And those are, they're comfortable being not accepted. They're comfortable being rejected. They're comfortable, and they don't try to conform. They don't try to belong. Of course we all do, but it's a matter of degrees, right? So that is something else so therefore I'm going back to your question. I don't think it's a question of pain. So if you want to conform, if you want to be accepted, if you want to be part of the traditional thinking, the normal thinking in any endeavor in life, and you're not, it's going to be very, very painful for you. But for a lot of people that create new things, it's not pain. It's part of life, and they're comfortable with it. Actually, some people even seek it. There are people in the world that are created big things in life, in which they went out of their way to show themselves as being deviant from society accepting them, right? There've been writers, there've been poets, and there've been a lot of business people like that. So Steve Jobs being one example of that, right? He was very comfortable.
Yeah. It does remind me, you said something earlier, and I might be paraphrasing. You said you had a disobedience to authority. So I don't know whether that's I'm not going to conform, and I love what you've shared, because that's that inner confidence, knowing who you are, backing your thoughts, backing your ideas. It goes back to that unwavering belief that we spoke about right at the beginning.
Absolutely. I think when I was growing up, my family, a lot of who you are is a product of growing up or your experiences in your 20s. That doesn't mean that your later experiences in life don't shape you, but the biggest shaping of your life is is in your early years, as when you're 7, 8, 9, 10, teenager, and in your 20s, you get shaped. So I always go back to whenever I try to explain something that I am, the first thing that I do is go back and see if I can explain it through my upbringing. And if I cannot explain it through my upbringing, it must have been later on in life, and therefore I begin to examine, experiences later on in life, which are many, and they shape you too. But so when I was growing up, I grew up in a military family, and the society of my country was kind of divided into three camps. There was the business elite, that ruled the economy of the country. The military elite, who basically established law and order, but was the real power, right, in the country. And there was obviously the rest of the population, right? So I was part of that military complex, and the military complex did not mix and match, did not mix up with the business, part, and that was a way for the autocrat of the country to divide, so that divide and conquer, right? You don't let people create coalitions that can overthrow you. So it was interesting because part of my family, my mother's side, we're all part of that kind of business elite, a business complex, and my father obviously was part of the other one, but I couldn't really spend a lot of time in that, so I was not accepted, right? I was rejected, by that, and I had to stick to my upbringing in the military, with the military families, the political family. It was political and military. Think about it: political and military versus the business. So I hang around all the politicians. I hang around all the military people, and therefore, when I was growing up, I didn't know anything about business. Business to me was like the most foreign thing that ever happened, that could ever happen. So but I was comfortable that even though I wanted to have friends on the other side, I wanted to do this, it was not part of it was not part of my realm, and I was, and when I tried it a number of times, I was rejected or pulled back, right? And I was comfortable with that. So anyhow, so when I look at later on in life, my ability to to navigate in circles, in certain circles, whether it's political, economic, or investments, or social circles, and the like, honestly, I go in it, and I am who I am. I try to be who I am, and I don't care. I honestly don't care if they like it or if they don't like it. Fortunately for me, most people have liked it. So I belong to a lot of circles: political circles, foreign policy circles, military circles, obviously investment banking circles, investment circles, and other businesses. And I can navigate easily from one to the other one without any baggage, without any constraints, because either people like it or they don't. And if they don't like it, tough luck, right?
And just, I want to quickly touch on your family here, because in the conversations we had for the book, it certainly came up for me what an influence your parents have been, and I'm curious, what are some of the key lessons that have shaped you, that they imparted with you?
So my father was an orphan. His late father's second wife, who was a very well-to-do lady, and extremely well-to-do lady in the country, and provided for him. But he wanted to make his own life, and therefore he joined the military academy, and he became a member of the military. And that, so a lot of his teachings, a lot of his experiences were about charting your own course, determining your own future, not being told by family members what to do, who to become. You're the master of your own destiny, and you gotta follow what you like. You gotta follow your passion. You gotta follow that. So I learned a great deal from him in that. Secondly, he was a bit of an intellectual, even though as a military person, he was more of a military intellectual. So, and he studied for about 6, 7 years in graduate schools in the US. So what they studied in graduate schools in the military in the US is about strategy, it's about leadership, it's about management, of management of a military operation, it's about leadership and all that. So therefore, he was able to teach me, a lot about leadership, a lot about strategy, a lot about management, even though it wasn't a business management, it was the management of an armed forces. It was about leadership in the armed forces and all of that. So, and since he noticed that I liked it, he would take me, he would read books, he would tell me about, his heroes. Remember, he was a product of World War II. That's what, when he came to life, not to life, but when he was, in his 20s and 30s. So therefore, you know, he would uh, he would teach me about Churchill, obviously, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He would teach me about George Patton and the character, about Montgomery as a character, about Eisenhower as a character, about George Marshall as a character. But the interesting thing was, he wouldn't tell me who's better, who's worse. He would just say, here are different characters, and they have different elements of success. They have different personalities, and all of that. So that was his life. His life was examining, World War II, and then the Korean War. So I lived in an environment where that's what I learned about leadership. That's what I learned about a lot of things. So and then of course, he would love movies, so he would take me to movies of World War II, and movies about Eisenhower and the decisions that he made, and the invasion of Normandy, and Patton and his, when he was trying to run through Europe in order to get to Berlin, and the compromise as to who took over Berlin. They let the Soviets take over Berlin, and why, and the political implications of that, and all of that. So it was like a theater. It was like a novella, right? It was like a soap opera, so to speak, for me, and with all these characters. But then later on in life, I realized that you could take that and apply it to business. You could take that to apply it to the geopolitical war, the geopolitical world. So he unintentionally was giving me all the tools to analyze problems, to analyze managerial issues, to analyze logistical issues, to analyze lapse of leadership, to analyze bad political decisions and all of that. So a lot of what I learned about business, I actually didn't learn in business. I learned it in that life, which I then applied to business. As I went to business school, and I joined investment banking, and then I created MSCI. I had that incredible schooling of all of that. So that was, him. And briefly, my mother was an extremely resilient, determined woman. There was nothing that will face her. There was no obstacle that she couldn't, overcome. There was no difficulty in life. She had an incredible sense of optimism. She was very religious, and religious people come in two forms. You either have very strong morality, or you have very strong faith, or both, of course, or both. But a lot of people are very religious, but they're very moral people. They don't have a strong faith. My mother had an incredibly unshakable faith, religious faith. So that faith allowed her to never be the cow by any problem. Incredible optimism, incredible sense of purpose, incredible sense of optimism, of positivism in the world, and she was extremely demanding. I was what in America we call a straight A student, meaning I was in the top of my class, And occasionally I will get a grade that was 2 shades below, 1 shade below the top grade of the class. And I would, go home and present my grades to her. And she would say, oh, this is fantastic. This is fantastic. You're doing so well and all of that. And she said, what happened in this course? And I would say, oh, there was an exam, I didn't do as well or whatever. And she would say, this is great. Next time, try better. Next time, try better. So it was never enough unless it was perfect, right? For her. So that, over the years, that is still in all of us, my siblings, an incredible sense of accomplishment. You needed to achieve things. You could not go home and be mediocre. You will not eat at home. If you were mediocre. You needed to do the best. And she'd also would tell me that competition was not a competition with other students. She would say, your competition is your ability to perform yourself. Is don't compare yourself to others. Compare yourself to your abilities. And if you're not maximizing your abilities, you're losing. You're losing. But if you feel that you have pushed your abilities to the maximum and you're average or below average or whatever, it's okay. That's what God gave you. God gave you an endowment, and you have maximized your endowment. And if that's all you've done, that's all you can do is maximize your endowment that God gave you, and everything else is fate, basically, right?
I mean, listening to your mum's that optimism, that unwavering belief, it clearly it's something you very much embody. And with your father, that schooling, that military schooling, some of these key attributes and qualities and behaviors that you've learned, that you've applied in leadership. I'm wondering, when you hire for talent in your own leadership team, or equally, within MSCI, what are the key things that you're looking for?
There are certain things that I look for that are necessary but not sufficient for success, but they're necessary. And then I focus on the things that are sufficient, for success. So you go through an interview, you go through all the necessary things. Is this person is this person smart? Does this person have experience, relevant experience in what you're trying to do? Does this person motivated, to take the job? Does this person, want to work hard, and a lot of things, right? So you go through a set of necessary conditions. Then once I check the box in all of that, then I go for the real the things that are going to make the difference, and the things that are going to make the difference. And there are a number of questions that I ask that I'm trying to determine. The first one is how much intellectual curiosity the person has.
Yeah.
If the person has no drive of curiosity, it's not going to do well in our business. How much drive, how much self-driven motor does the person have to learn new things, to explore new ideas, to think about new concepts? The second one is, how ambitious is this person? How irreverent, if you want to go back to that, how irreverent is this person? Obviously, you can't find people that are, totally irreverent like entrepreneurs, but I'm trying to get as much of that in somebody that joins the company as I can. So because that intellectual curiosity, that drive and all that. The other thing that I'm trying to determine is passion. How passionate is this person about this field, what we're trying to do? And you could have a very strong intellectual curiosity, but it's about music. For example, you could be very driven, very ambitious about music, but we don't do music. We do investment, right? So therefore, you need to find, is this person passionate about the investment industry, the finance industry, or this person is passionate about opera, and if he's passionate about opera, he or she's going to work 9 to 5 and go to the opera every night, and that's not what I want, right? So that's another, So I ask questions like I try to ask questions like that. The other one is long-termism. So I normally have a couple questions that people look at me a little bit weird, and the question is, what do you want your tombstone to say about you? And they said, wait a minute, I thought this was a job, not a psychology test. I said, no, I want to know what your tombstone will say about you. And so that tells you a lot about the person. If the person says, great in business and all of that, you don't want to hire that person, because that person has no life, no kids, no family, or at least doesn't put a lot of value. So it's a little bit of a balance how the question gets answered. The other question is, what do you want to be doing 10 years from now? Mm-hmm. And that throws off a lot of people, because it goes back to this long-termism. I said, 10 years from now? Wow, I don't know. I want to be working at MSCI. And I said, no, I don't want that answer. What do you want to be doing 10 years from now? That's a question that I try to ask to get a sense of long-termism, but also a sense of ambition, and the person doesn't want to tell you, I want to take your job, because that would be a little bit too aggressive. But that will tell you how driven and ambitious the person is, right? In some respects. So anyhow, it's not like one attribute is a quiver of arrows, and there are some arrows that are necessary for defense, so to speak, and other arrows that are going to be the offensive arrows. If you don't have the defensive arrows, you're not going to last. But if you're going to really, really be outstandingly successful, you need to have the offensive, arrows in the quiver.
I love the way you've described that. And I have two very quick, probably not quick questions, but the first one, it's just around, I suppose, just your three top insights, lessons in terms of the world it's moving quicker than ever before. It's turbulent, change is complex, it's acute, it's pervasive. How do you advise people, or how do you lead your organization in turbulent times?
We have gone through a lot of turbulent times in the company, and but not as turbulent as my life, that's for sure, right? So my life, especially early on, the first, say, 25, 30 years, was extremely, extremely turbulent, right? And therefore, I learned that a number of things. The first thing is, the turbulence doesn't last forever, right? A lot of people, when they're in the moment of the turbulence, they think it's going to last forever. And therefore, they bail out, or they get desperate, or whatever. And I said to them, we just got to bunker down. We just got to, bunker down, and it will go away at some point. Maybe it'll take a year, maybe 2, maybe it's 3, or maybe it's forever. But if it's forever, we're not going to be around. So don't worry about it, right? So that's instills a sense of dimension, a sense of time dimension, on the turbulence. The second thing is, you just don't take the turbulence on the chin. You try to do something about it. And it is in turbulent periods, it is in periods of crisis that where the best opportunities come. I have a saying at MSCI, a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. So you just don't, become passive and take the beating. No, you create strategies as to how you're going to react to the turbulence, and how that, they're going to make you better. So when you come out of the turbulence, you come out ahead of everyone else, because the majority of people in business actually retrench in times of turbulence. We actually strike in times of turbulence. That's when we, among the bigger companies that we have bought have been in difficult times. I am a contrarian. I expand when things are bad. I remember when I first came to Wall Street, there was a saying, that that you buy when there's blood in the streets, right? That's when you buy, when there's blood in the streets. That's going to make you the. Now, what they didn't tell you at the time that there may be blood in the street when you buy, but there may be more blood, later on, and therefore your asset goes down even further, right? But you're never gonna reach the bottom. You're gonna get to the bottom, but you strike, you expand, you hire people, you do this in bad times, because what happens in companies is you're trying to create competitive advantage over the long term. Competitive advantage. Very, very hard to create competitive advantages in boom times, because in boom times people are throwing money like crazy, the go-go years and all of that. So it is very hard to create a huge distance with your competitors. But if you, in bad times, first of all, get an alignment with the team, a sense of purpose, a sense of dimension, a sense that this is not going to last forever. Secondly, you come up with great strategies to strike and to expand and all of that. When you come out of the turbulent times, you're going to be way ahead of everyone else, because every other competitor is going to retrench. It's human nature. They retrench. They don't go into the problem. Their boards don't let them go into their problems. Their management team, their own personalities. So I train my board of directors that we will expand in difficult times. I train my management team that we will go in the rainstorm when things are bad, in order to create better products, better service, and hire better people and all of that. So that's how you do it. And then obviously you need to inspire people. You need to keep them faithful. You need to keep them believing during the difficult time, just like we were talking about Churchill before. It is easy to despair. So 20, 30 years ago, I spent a lot of time examining the Shackleton expedition to Antarctica, and why their team survived and came out alive, and the other team of the other ship didn't survive. And that is because you need to create a sense of purpose, a sense of optimism, a sense that, yes, we will come out of this issue. We will come out. We will prevail if we stick together. So that's how you manage in those difficult issues, those difficult circumstances.
I remember you using the analogy with me about the boat. You said when the tide is rising, it's, you can't really differentiate yourself. But when it's in those storms, that's when you can really, make your mark.
Yes, but it is against human nature. See, there are a number of things that, if you want to be an exceedingly good person, either family member, friend, or business person, or accomplished, you need to study human nature. You need to understand human nature really well. If you do, it's going to give you an enormous competitive advantages. So you need to know what human nature is and where is it going to go in a particular situation. So when things are bad, human nature is despair. Oh my God, it's bad. It's going to get worse. We're going to die. All of us are going to die. We're not going to survive, and all of that. That's human nature. So you need to go against human nature. You need to understand that it's normal. Most people say this is crazy. No, it is normal. This is how we are made up. So you now need to then say, what is your recipe to arrest that, to make sure you turn it around, right? In that's so. I try to be a student of human nature in order to then say, how do we do the opposite when circumstances are difficult, right?
I love that, because humans are predictable. And as we close, the question that I'd like to close with is, if you were to go back to your younger self, what's the wisdom you'd love the younger Henry to know?
Take more risk. Take more smart risks. As much as I taking, significant smart risks in my life, and they have panned out. When I go back and I examine a lot of circumstances in my life, I would have done better if I had taken smarter risks. And I'm talking about in business, right? So, and that means that, or in life in general, it means that maybe you had a group of people, you were a young person, you were in a setting in which there was a debate going on as to whether you should do that deal or you should get that client or whatever, and you didn't speak up. You should have spoken up. Whether there was an opportunity to take a responsibility, and you didn't go forward and say, I'll take that responsibility, I'll do that, I'll fix that problem, I'll work over the weekend, all weekend to fix that problem. A lot of people shy away from that, right? So whether it was with your career in general, in which there was a job opening somewhere in another country, in another region, or in another industry, or in another part of the company, and you waited for people to give it to you, you didn't go forward to grab it and say, I'll volunteer to do that, I want to apply for that, or whatever, or whether it's an acquisition, and the like. What happens is that risks gets magnified in the short term, extremely magnified. When you're looking at risk in the context of a week or 2 or 3 or even a year, it gets hugely magnified. So therefore you get scared. You don't master it. You want to stay away from it. So and all human beings are risk averse. So that's what you do. It's human nature. So what you need to do is to go against your human nature and say, no, I can master this risk. I can dominate it. I can make it work for me. I can make it my friend, and it's going to come out. And of course, from time to time, the risk does materialize, and it bites you. But that's going to be a small number of times compared to that. So that's what I would tell a younger person of me starting 30, 40 years ago.
Take more smart risk. Well, Henry, as always, it's been such a delight and a pleasure. Thank you for being so generous in spirit, sharing your lessons, your insights. They are going to have a profound impact on all those that listen to them. So many, many thanks.
Thanks for having me.